Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Game Over Ottawa channel. Our first upload in a while here. We left off on this channel with the Sens losing on home ice to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs, and we are now back in preseason with the Sens losing on home ice to the Toronto Maple Leafs. More likely though, more accurately, the Toronto Marlies, basically, with that lineup they iced. But we're back, Maude here, and glad to be joined by Mike as well. How are you doing today, Mike?
Doing good. I mean, not the best outcome for the game today, but preseason is preseason, and we did learn a lot.
So we've never done preseason content for Game Over before, and we just figured that it would be a nice little way to ease back into the season here today, talking about training camp, talking about roster predictions and stuff like that. We're recording right after the 4-3 loss to the Leafs on Sunday, September 21st. But there are obviously a lot of issues to get into, topics to get into that pertain to the team as a whole as we head towards the regular season. And this is obviously pre-recorded content as opposed to our normal live shows. So we just want to let everyone know that we're going to be switching up the content schedule a little bit for at least the first half of the season here. There's a possibility that we go back to live shows after every game in about January. But for now, we're going to be doing like weekly recap sort of things, or just podcasts whenever there's like a big news story or whatever related to the Sens. So if you want to see Game Over return to the every game, live after every game, I would suggest checking out our Patreon, potentially supporting us on there. That's the best way to give us that help that we need to sort of get back to full. But for now, we're switching things up a little bit. The content will be a little more spread out, but it'll still be packed with content within the episodes, you know? So just a little bit of a switch up on the channel here, and we're hoping to return to our usual format later on.
And also, aside from that, also before we get into any preseason content or any talks about the roster predictions, there are a couple of small little bits of news I feel every Sens fans need to know. If you've missed this, it's just a quick recap. For those questioning about the outcome of all the players that were involved in the Hockey Canada lawsuit, obviously Alex Formenton was still, the Ottawa Senators still had the rights to him, but they confirmed, Steve Staios confirmed in a press conference that he will not be part of the Ottawa Senators franchise to come. Now, obviously, his rights are still owned by the Sens, so he can be traded or let go, but as of yet we don't fully know. We do know he won't be part of the team from now onwards. There was
just
a
quickly
small
on that, do you think they'll be able to get an asset for him?
I doubt it. I feel like, again, so much of what these players are worth right now is completely subjective to the teams that want them. And I feel like the overall view, if you were to look at every team across the league, it's pretty low. I feel like they're effectively free agents, and for the ones who are still RFAs, they're free agents with baggage.
Exactly, and I'm thinking that since he's playing in Switzerland at the moment, I think his contract over there goes right up until his NHL suspension is over in like December or something.
Yeah.
I think a lot of teams are probably going to wait to see if he's doing well in Switzerland, and then if he is, or even if he isn't, a team is probably going to pick him up for like future considerations and then sign him to a contract or something like that. Just given the situation, it's a shit situation. A lot of people don't want to see these guys back in the league. It would be nice if we could get a late round pick, but we just want to move on overall, so
yeah,
not the biggest deal, right?
Not to mention the only player I've heard that was part of that suit and who I feel like is actually gaining traction in terms of like signing rumors or trading rumors is Carter Hart. I don't think I've heard the name of anyone else who's been involved really like to join any significant team. All I've really heard is Hart.
I think I've heard some rumors about Dubé and McLeod, but obviously they haven't signed yet, so I don't think teams are like lining up to sign them. I think it's sort of I almost wonder if it's a bit of a waiting period where everyone's like, who's going to be the first team to actually sign one of these controversial guys? And then the rest of them will sign after, because it's like, okay, at first, at least we weren't the first ones.
Someone did it.
Yeah, so a little bit unfortunate aspect there, but Formenton will not be playing with the Ottawa Senators, which I think most people are happy to see.
Yeah. And also, aside from that as well, obviously we're already partway through training camp because we're already into the preseason games. 3 players from the Sens training camp have already been returned to their respective junior teams, and those are Gabriel Eliasson, Blake Vanek, and Eric Wallenius. All of them have returned back to their respective teams. Honestly, out of the little bits and pieces I saw out of them out of training camp, the 3 of them were, how do I put it? they were unnoticeable in a positive sense. Eliasson was noticeable in a different way. He very much stirred the drink and caused a lot of chaos in the rookie tournament, in the rookie showcase. But it was, aside from that, I'm not surprised those were the first 3 sent home. Although I'm excited to see how Blake Vanek particularly develops, because he was one of the, if not the youngest player in the draft that we picked up recently. So I'm curious to see how he tears up the W.
I'm really curious in him. Basically, like, any player that's the son of a former star NHL player, you're like, oh my god, he could be just like Thomas Vanek, you know? But he wasn't too noticeable at the rookie tournament, so I'm not surprised that he got sent home early in preseason, but he'll be an interesting one to watch, as well as he's moving into the WHL for the first time. Like you said, he's really young. He's August birthday, so he actually only just turned 18 last month. And coming out of the USHL into the WHL, so he'll be really interesting to watch in junior this season.
Yep, and one last thing as well before we go into preseason and proper roster stuff. Just 2 quick notes about injuries to the players who are expected to be part of the main Sens roster. We have Nick Jensen, who obviously had hip surgery over the summer, and he was even injured towards the end of the last year. He just recently, yesterday, got on the ice for the first time at training camp, so no one's really expecting him to be... I mean, I believe Travis Green did say that, you know, it's entirely based on how he does over the next coming weeks in preparation of the first game. But I don't think anyone would be surprised if we heard that he wouldn't be on the starting roster just for the sake of injury. And then another player who might be in a similar boat is Lars Eller, who the Sens picked up in free agency over the summer. He is in a non-contact jersey as of yesterday. Now, obviously, whether he's on the same timeline as Nick Jensen or if he's a bit sooner, which it does seem like the case. Again, another player, I wouldn't be surprised where he's not on the starting roster, but he might be on the roster, 2, 3, 4 games in.
The nice thing about Nick Jensen, his situation exactly, obviously being injured is not a nice thing, but the situation regarding the right D depth is that he doesn't need to be rushed back into the lineup, whereas they kind of did that a lot last season, where he would miss a game or two and then he's right back in there, and you could kind of tell that he was playing injured. He played injured for basically the last few months of the regular season and into the playoffs too. He was doing his best out there, but sometimes you could tell. So if he gets re-injured at any point in the season, it's nice to know that the Sens have got way better right D depth than they did last year.
Just D depth in general, honestly, from what I've seen.
And they can let him take his time to return too. Like you said, he was just back on the ice for the first time in training camp. They don't need to rush him into preseason games or anything like that. Just take his time, which is great that they have the ability to do that.
Aside from that, though, that's about it for the little bits of notes I want to point out before we really go into the preseason game. I don't think we're going to go into the preseason game, period by period, goal by goal here, but there are some key points I think we deserve to bring up for people who have been, just like us, dying to see Sens hockey ever since they were eliminated in the first round to the Leafs.
For sure. So since we were talking about Nick Jensen and potentially him missing some time to start the season, or the depth that can replace him if he misses time at any point later in the season, I want to talk about Jordan Spence, because this was our first time seeing him in a Senators jersey, and especially in the first period today, I noticed him a lot. I was really impressed with his puck handling skills in the offensive zone. He was shooting the puck on net. He was setting up his teammates for passes. I was really impressed with him in his debut, and I think he could be a huge addition just in terms of, you could play him on any pairing, I feel like. Like, he's technically a third pair D, but he seems to me like a guy who could be a good fit with any one of our left D, really, right?
Yeah, especially because Spence, for everyone who, like me, really enjoyed the idea of someone like Eric Brandstrom in the team whenever he was brought up into the system, I like the idea of Spence being that person who can provide that offensive nature. But what's even better is that he doesn't have the same worries as Brandstrom did, where everyone was worried with his size and with how he played in battles in front of the net. Everyone was worried how he would get pushed aside. He wouldn't have that ability. Spence has already developed kind of a little bit of an ability where it's like, yes, he can be a good puck handling defenseman, and yes, he's got a pretty good one-timer. He's also not like weak in his own end. There was a lot of decent board battles I saw, and the times where he did make mistakes defensively, he quickly made up for it with his speed, with his jump, with his tenacity, I guess is the best way to put it. Now, obviously, the competition he faced off against today probably wasn't the best bet, and if anything, it's a good reminder that the reason why Spence was so good statistically last year is because he was on the third pair. But at the same time, if he's going to be in that position in the Sens, that means we got a good player. There's nothing wrong about getting a third pair right D and playing him in the third pair. It's more so, do we want him, like I imagine many Sens do, to fill in that top four position, like when a Jensen goes down, or pray if Zub gets injured, if Spence has to make that jump. Can he handle those higher minutes? And I think we did see a lot of promise in today's game, but we'll see how obviously it goes on. One more quick thing I want to add with Spence as well. There's that little bit of me that always appreciates whenever people in hockey wear numbers that aren't commonly associated to their position. I always liked whenever Charlie Coyle wore the number 4 back in the day when he was on the Wild, and then there's other players as well. I'm forgetting a lot of them. Will Smith wears like 2, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, that's a weird one.
Yeah, like you don't expect the number 2 for like a center, right? You expect that for like a defenseman. So seeing a defenseman rocking number 10 for me was like, I always appreciate when people do different things. And hey, if you're born in Australia, lived in Japan, and then moved to Newfoundland, I think you're not going to be too bothered by doing different things in the NHL.
Mm-hmm. When I was a kid and I played House League, I was a center wearing number 1 just because I was taller than all the other kids and the jerseys, the lower numbers were the biggest. So I was looking like a bit of a goof out there, especially with a really long last name and then the number 1 on the jersey as a forward. It was pretty silly. So I did that just out of necessity when I was a kid. But yeah, in terms of Jordan Spence, I think the comparison that you had of Eric Brannstrom is really good because I watched Jordan Spence and I'm like, wow, this is just if Eric Brannstrom was actually good, you know, like this
or if Eric Brannstrom was right-handed.
Yeah, this is what we expected Eric Brannstrom to be able to bring to the Sens, and sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. He was pretty inconsistent. We know obviously that a lot of the fan base liked him, but for whatever reason, coaches and GMs didn't.
Yeah.
It seems like Jordan Spence has a similar style, but he's been able to establish himself as an NHL defenseman, whereas Brannstrom wasn't able to. Like you mentioned, just probably better in the defensive zone, and we saw some of that today. So, good showing, I would say, for him, and I liked the pairing of him and Kleven, although on the topic of that, we have a potential Tyler Kleven injury that may have happened today. We're recording before there's any like post-game comments or anything, so
I'll keep an eye on
I'm not sure if there's any updates there, but I just wanted to mention that I feel like the one thing I would have liked to see the Sens do this offseason that they didn't is get sort of like even if it was a PTO, another left-handed defenseman to potentially be like a call-up option or a 7th D-man for that left-hand side, because we've got all that depth on right D, but after Tyler Kleven, it's basically just Donovan Sabrango and who else? Like, do they still have that guy Jeremy Davies in Belleville? I know a player that I would be very interested to. I don't think they would call him up, but one I would love if they were to call him up would be Thomas Shamara, just because I like the idea of him as a defenseman. Now, is this my bias to defensemen that are 6 foot or lower? Yes. I like it whenever people my size are playing in the NHL. I don't care. But I think what they're thinking probably as an organization is they feel confident enough that their left D in Belleville have grown enough where they can fill in as a 7th D option in the chance of injury. I hope so.
Not to mention too, I think in general, especially in comparison to last year, I just think our overall defensive depth from the NHL to the AHL is just better. It's not significantly better. It's not better enough where I could say confidently that someone could fill in aside from Sabrango, who obviously filled in a little last year. But I just think overall, just adding Spence and getting rid of Hamonic, no offense to Travis Hamonic, is very much enough of an upgrade where the defensive lines are going to be so much more even and they're going to be so much more consistent. Because if there's one thing, unfortunately, but was very much the case Travis Hamonic did, he just anchored whoever he was with over last season. So having just someone who isn't doing that, bringing someone up, will probably still be overall better than it was last year.
Yeah, I meant to mention that as well, because previously you were like, if Jordan Spence has to move him into the top 4, how's that going to be? Well, a lot of the time last season we had Travis Hamonic moving up into the top 4, so I'm pretty confident that Jordan Spence will be able to at least do better than Hamonic did in those minutes, so that's a positive no matter what. And yeah, just in terms of if Kleven misses any time from this potential injury, too, I do also remember a stretch last season where I can't remember if it was Clevin or Chabot who was injured, but one of the guys on the left side was out, and they had actually I think they played Maude and Palo on the left-hand side and Hamonic on the right side of the third pairing. So I do wonder if they're going to sort of bypass some of those left D in the minors again and just play a right-handed guy on the left side, because like Andronovsky, Hamara, they're just getting started in Belleville. I don't think you want to pull them up that quickly unless they're doing amazing. And then
I could totally see Jorian Donovan coming up.
Maybe Jorian Donovan if he really takes a step. I think all of those guys I'm really interested to watch in training camp. Other than Sabrango, those other guys weren't in the lineup here today. So that's one thing I'm really looking to going forward, is to see if any of those left-hand D can be a solid call-up option.
Okay, you want something logical, understandable, completely, reasonable. Would be Maude and Palo playing the left-hand side in case of injury to Clevin. But if you want to go something crazy, something a bit off the rails, so stupid it just might work. Yakimchuk lefty.
Oh my god, I don't know if he's ever played his offside, but with his puck moving ability and his stick handling.
Just for some games too. Like, you're not asking him to play the left-hand position for the rest of his career. You're saying like, hey, we're in a bit of a logjam. We know you can handle the puck. Go for it.
That's the thing too. If Yakimchuk is really ripping it up down there in Belleville, assuming that's where he starts, you might just call him up as the first D option, regardless of if you need a lefty or a right D, and either put him on that left side or shift someone else over to make room for him. So that's the other thing. Another thing to consider on the D is whether or not Carter Yakimchuk makes a huge impact this preseason like he did last year, because if he has an amazing preseason again, it's going to be a little tough to cut him to Belleville, even though I do think that's the most likely option.
Okay, and just as a quick little update as well, considering we're on the topic, Alex Adams from Sportsnet just tweeted that Travis Green does not yet have an update on Claude's injury. So we're still in the little bit of the dark for that, and nothing about Chabot. Another quick thing to notice as well is towards the very, very end of the game, Chabot caught a puck and immediately left. Now, it was the end of the game, so it might have just been a really precautionary thing of like, hey, just don't put him in the game at all anymore if he does strain anything else on the hand that he caught the puck with. But I really hope it's not some sort of like finger injury that really could take someone out. It's so annoying sometimes how in sports some of the most minor injuries can be some of the most biggest problems, depending on obviously what role you play or what game you play, what sport you play. But Clevin does seem to be the more significant injury, at least from what we saw on the ice.
Yeah, that's the most frustrating thing about preseason for me, is just watching like 6, 7, 8 games of just praying that none of your veteran players
I'm
get
glad
injured.
they cut it down to like, isn't it just 4 now? I'm glad they cut it down.
I think it's 6 this year. They went down from 8 to 6, but I think next year it's going to go down to 4 when the regular season goes up to 84 games, right? So more regular season games. But
I'm glad this isn't something we're ignoring.
Yeah, at least if players are getting injured, you would hope that it's in meaningful games and, they're giving their hardest for games that actually count. Whereas when they're just kind of playing pond hockey out there like today and you see someone get hurt, that's just really unfortunate, right? So hopefully, fingers crossed, that Clevin will be okay, Chabot will be okay, and hopefully no major injuries for the rest of preseason for all the teams across the league, because you want to see every team
not just
going
for
in
us.
at their best.
Yeah, we want to face teams at their best so we can beat them at their best. It's how sports should be seen as. You're not trying to, like, yes, you're supposed to just beat whatever, you face that night, but ideally, if you want to win the cup, if you want to be the best in any sport, you're going to eventually face the best. So... if you beat a injury-riddled Leafs to start the year, yes, we're going to take that win every day. But we're also going to be aware that, hey, if the Leafs are fully healthy, do we win that game? That's the thought you always have. And another thing I just wanted to bring up really quick before we move on to the next topic, and this is something I just thought of, and I'm like, I don't have an answer. What's the last good puck-moving right-handed defenseman we had on the Sens? Yeah,
I'm trying to think of who would actually be classified
as a puck mover. Is it Erik Karlsson?
Probably, because since him... the only good
Zaitsev?
Yeah, since him the only good right-hand D were Zub and DeMello, and then now Nick Jensen, and you would categorize all of them more as defensive D.
It was always they have the left-handers would move it up.
So
yeah.
You're totally right that it's nice to have that actually coming from the right-hand side. It's been very left side heavy for the puck moving ability with Chabot and Sanderson since the departure of Karlsson. They haven't really had that guy. And like you said, even with Eric Branstrom trying to establish himself, sometimes they played him on the right, but he was a left shot D. So that's huge that there's a little bit of that puck moving ability on the right-hand side now.
Yep.
'Cause even-
That was
yeah,
it, though. I just wanted to mention
I
that.
forgot about Jacob Chikrin too. That's another. They had
Yeah.
another left-handed guy there. They tried him on the right-hand side, wasn't working. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to actually have a true right-hand D with some of that ability. And I would assume he might even get some second power play unit time like he did today.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
The only
too.
problem is though, like, how can you not give Chabot and Sanderson power play time? That's
Well,
more
you
so
can
my
have
worry.
maybe on the second unit you could have Chabot and Spence, and then just three.
Yes, if you go 2D, yeah. But I'm just
Mm-hmm.
thinking for what the Sens have run in recent times, which has very much been 4 forwards 1D. So
Sure, yeah.
they could go 2, and I wouldn't be opposed to it. But I just think, like, then which of those 2D would you run 2D with? Would you rather have Sanderson Spence, or would you rather have Chabot Spence? I think you'd probably be leaning Chabot Spence in that case. Have the
Yeah,
second
because you'd
D
probably
be a
want to
little
load
more-
up the first unit with 4 forwards, no matter
Yeah.
what.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that about covers it for the D situation because the top 4D is pretty much perfectly set. It's all just about how that bottom pair is going to shake out and how the depth.
Yeah, and
will-
who's paired with who? Because
Yeah,
honestly,
exactly.
as
Well-
much as we expect pairs to be set, it could change.
It could. I just think that Sanderson Zub is pretty much a lock. Chabot and Jensen,
if healthy.
That's the thing is if
Yeah.
healthy. So he might not be around to start the season, in which case it gets a little more interesting. But I'd say
I
that
really
about does it
hope
for the
that's.
D.
Yeah, I just really hope that if Jensen doesn't start, if Spence makes a name for himself, I hope that it does bring that good question of do we keep Spence in the top 4? Because I feel like, no offense to Jensen, I think he's been great when he's been healthy, and his pair with Chabot last year was a revelation in terms of like last year's defensive structure, and it really helped Chabot kind of flourish again. But I really do think if Spence makes that jump in the top 4 and he proves himself, I would love Jensen on the third pair. I think he'd be the ideal third pair defenseman. He'd be so perfect for that role, especially going from Hamnick as the third pair or second pair right D to Jensen as the third pair right D. I think that'd be perfect.
One thing to consider too, jumping off of that, is I believe Jensen's in the last year of his contract. If Spence can really establish himself in the top 4, you can maybe move on from Jensen or sign him to a cheaper deal as a third pairing guy in the offseason and make more room for Yakimchuk to come in on that third pairing too. As opposed to if you really, really need Nick Jensen in your top 4, you're going to have to be paying him more money to do that, right? So that's one thing to consider looking forward as well. It could be a huge opportunity for Jordan Spence, depending how long Nick Jensen is out for. All right, I had a camera glitch, so I'm back on a different camera. Good timing because we were just about to switch topics into the goaltending, which I think was kind of the story of today's 4-3 loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs B squad, as they did not really have any of their best players playing today, but they still scored, I believe it was 4 goals on 20 shots. Linus Ullmark pulled from the net after the first period. Often goalies split the game in preseason, so I don't know if the plan was for him to play the whole game or just half of it, but the plan, I'm sure, was not for him to leave right at the end of the first period. They switched to Maude Schoblocher. What did you think? Do you think it was a case sort of a veteran just kind of not giving his all in preseason, where it's like, just getting back into the swing of things, you don't want to go too hard? Like maybe he was kind of given like 70% effort. I don't know. I feel like compared to the Leafs goalies are their AHL guys who are really trying to make a name for themselves, and they played great today. Whereas Linus Ullmark, it's kind of like his spot is set in stone. He has a big contract. He doesn't need to like ball out in the first game of preseason, but also you'd like to see better performance than what they got today, right?
Yeah, I think with Linus, it's definitely not lack of trying, which probably isn't the best thing considering how he played today. He let in 3 goals on 8 shots. Now, one of the goals was screened. One of them was like a full clapper from the top of the circle, and the third one, ironically, which was the first goal, was that like Matt and Palo and completely missing his assignment and leading to kind of like a free drive in front of the net and a shot and a goal. Now, was that all on Ullmark? No. He should have done better on, I would argue, the first and second goal. But the third one honestly wasn't too bad. It was a screen, and I think it was lightly tipped as well. That goal from like Villeneuve or whatever his name is, the Leafs defenseman. But funnily enough, I don't know if you heard about this, but one of the earliest quotes, one of the more interesting quotes of Ullmark early in the training camp was that he admitted that he's not been playing well at all, like in training camp, and he seemed pretty like mad about it, like at himself, right? Like he could have done better. And so seeing how he performs throughout this game, I mentioned, like, it's a little worrying that he's pissed how he's playing and he started poorly in preseason. If anything, I think that's just him trying to really set his like mindset as early on as he can, as soon as we're playing serious games, that like, hey, I gotta do better. But also at the same time, I think the quote we got post-game, we got from Claire Hanna, was pretty a good sign. Linus Ullmark says he doesn't put any stock into preseason performances. Also said it was a higher-ups decision for him to not sit on the bench during the second and third periods. Ullmark said he lifted and recovered after playing in the first. Like, he went to the weight room, basically.
Okay.
So I think that the only thing with Ullmark that I feel that was very prevalent last year and pretty obvious in the first period of this year is that he is so calm to a fault that I feel like, not calm as in like he doesn't care, calm as in he's trying to keep himself like at an even keel, and that sometimes it can what's the word here, like not lash, but sometimes it can show that it almost seems like he's unprepared, weirdly enough. I'm not too annoyed with how he performed today, especially because the other goaltender, Matt Sogard, also let in a goal that was pretty soft today.
Yeah, despite only letting in one goal, the goal that Sogard let in was like by far the worst one today.
Yes,
so.
yeah. So I'm looking at this just as a like shake it off, first game back. Not to mention too, one thing that I think that we learned from Ullmark in the playoffs is that he does not let previous games affect him. He had one of those horrible games in the playoffs and then immediately went to have the shutout, the 4-0 shutout. So I'm not at all worried about Ullmark here. I'm just happy that he's healthy. And honestly, I think it's pretty funny that he immediately was like, okay, done the first period, coach is calling me off. All right, I'm going to go lift weights.
Yeah.
I just think it's kind of funny.
It's interesting, like you said, with his calm demeanor, because when things are going poorly, I feel like sometimes fans almost want to see that passion and a bit of that
anger,
rage,
yeah.
and just like not necessarily like lashing out or anything, but just like to see the frustration, because like you said, the really calm demeanor can come across as like, oh, he doesn't care that much, or like, oh, he doesn't actually think he's performing that badly, even though the results are bad. But that's kind of just like us fans psychoanalyzing and going a little too far with it. So I think overall his calmness is good, because he doesn't let the lows really get him down, and like you said, he's able to have those great bounce back performances. And I don't quite remember preseason last year, because in the grand scheme of things, it's not that important.
The only thing that mattered in preseason last year was that Yakimchuk looked great.
Yeah, exactly. That was the memorable thing. But in the start of the regular season, Linus Ullmark did start pretty slowly as well. He had that great game against Florida in the home opener, but then his stats were hovering like below 900 save percentage for the first month or so. So we've seen him start slowly, and we've seen him go on those insane hot streaks. Maybe we're in for that kind of thing again this year. I think we shouldn't overreact too much to individual performances game to game from Linus Ullmark until it becomes a pattern, right?
Yeah, you want to see better, but that's the thing about goaltending. Goaltending is the most chaotic position in hockey for a reason. Not only chaotic in the sense of what you have to do, but chaotic in the sense of consistency being tough to get. Like, it's not often, like, we've seen so many times in hockey where a goalie has a great year and the next year they're so bad by comparison. And I feel like the thing about Ullmark that's made him so good is that he's been so consistent over the course of his career. Whether he's played lots of games or little games, whichever team he's played on, he's been a pretty damn good goalie. And I feel like if he's saying to us he doesn't put stock in preseason games, I think we should respect him enough to agree.
Yeah, and from there, let's get into the forwards, because I also feel like on the topic of veterans not really putting too much stock into preseason games, one of the things going into this preseason that's very interesting is the top line right wing spot of who's going to fill that spot. Pretty much Giroux versus Zetterlund. And today, in terms of the best players, the veterans on the Sens, with Giroux in that spot, him, Stützle, and Tkachuk, I feel like that line, they were good. They had chances today, but it was a little bit of like hot dogging and like dangling around the AHL players on this Leafs roster today, and just the finishing wasn't there. Like they were making moves, but they weren't exactly like keeping it simple and just doing plays that are like high percentage ways of scoring. So I felt like it was a little hard to judge whether or not that's going to be a line that they go forward with this season. It was basically DJ Smith's go-to, but not always Travis Green's favorite, I think, for the top line. I was disappointed that Zetterlund wasn't in the lineup today because he's honestly one of my players that I'm looking forward to watching the most in the preseason, and I really want to see him get that chance besides Stützle. So, what did you think in terms of that? Do you think that it was just kind of not too much of an important game for that line?
I think that this is a dual. How do I put it? I think there are two key reasons as to why that Giroux has played in the top line with Tkachuk and Stützle today. I think it's part of it is just to get all of them back into the familiarity of playing an NHL season, especially because they played with each other most of the time last year. But also, I think part of it's also just kind of giving Giroux that veteran respect that he deserves after playing so long in the league and playing so well. But I feel like I do tend to agree where I did want to see Zetterlund today, and I did want to see him on the top line because, preseason is so good to test stuff out. I feel like that's one thing that a lot of coaches should do. Like preseason, you should go crazy. You should put players on lines that aren't normally onside lines because then you can see if things work, if things don't work. And starting with Tkachuk, Stützle, Giroux was a bit kind of like, I didn't know what I was expecting. Like, yeah, sure, I would like to have seen someone else, but also I completely understand going with that lineup. Now, I think that today they got pretty unlucky. Yeah, they were dangling a lot. Yeah, they were clearly using that kind of like, we know that we're the first line on a team facing off against an AHL team, and we're going to prove it. And I did also feel like that they got pretty unlucky with some of their shots. Like that first shot of the game from Stützle probably should have gone in.
Yeah,
and
that was ridiculous.
Just a little unlucky.
That didn't bounce in off a defender or off of Tkachuk's body or stick or something like that. That was insane. So you are right that they had some bad luck.
Yeah,
I think Stützle, they said that he wasn't credited with a shot, late in the third period for the whole game, but he must have had, 5 or 6 scoring chances.
Don't care if he wasn't credited for a shot. He drove offense in this game. And there's nothing bad I could say about any of the top three's performance this game in terms of Tkachuk, Stützle, Giroux. They all had pretty good games, I think, and they all really drove play. They kept the puck in the opponent's zone. They got a lot of ice time. They got a lot of shots off. But I just feel like when it comes to the whole argument on the top right-hand position, the only thing that I learned today is that because this is the first version of the first line we've seen, it might be as boringly simple as that's what he wants to go with, he being Travis Green.
You're right that they'll probably... that safe option really is just the front runner, especially because I think Giroux's defensive prowess over the course of his career definitely brings something to that line. We've seen Tkachuk and Stützle get better as defensive players, but if you put a guy like Zetterlund or you put a guy like Batherson, you do lose that veteran presence and that known commodity. And also low-key, Stützle still isn't that good at faceoffs, although he's improving. They've often had Giroux taking the faceoffs on that line. So that's another thing to consider too, is whether or not Stützle can improve his face-off performance with Giroux potentially not on his line. If they
exactly. Yeah. But can't really say much about Zetterlund or any other right winger who were to fill in Batherson, for example, because they were either, as Batherson was in the second line today, or in the case of Zetterlund, they weren't even on the ice today. So honestly, though, maybe as a slight transition, kind of talking away from the first line, I feel like there are some other players we definitely deserve to give credit today, and one of them was a right winger.
Yeah, you thinking Arthur Kaliyev?
I think Arthur Kaliyev, he had a good game. He had a really good game today. I feel like he didn't do anything notable in the first. I think he really stepped up on the second and third period, but he scored the second goal, and it was a pretty nice quick shot fighting in front of the net, which for a player that is known as a sniper is really nice to see. I'm happy it's translating quickly. And he also, not too soon afterwards, drew a penalty and really drove the power play on said penalty. So I feel like he definitely was one of the standout offensive players today that wasn't the players we expect, like Batherson, like Tkachuk, Stützle, and Giroux. And honestly, in a similar vein to what I was saying about having Yakimchuk on the third pair lefty being a really crazy idea that could work, I think, it would be maybe a bit soon, but again, in the preseason, why not try it out? Kaliyev on the top line?
Yeah, and I believe the first lineups that we got in training camp had Kaliyev next to Stützle. We didn't end up seeing that at even strength in this game, but they did have him on the first power play unit, and we're trying to set him up for those one-timers on the left-hand side, kind of like we used to see with Mike Hoffman back in the day. So they are definitely playing into Kaliyev's offensive strengths and seeing if he can add some depth scoring to this team. I think he has the ability to partially replace Adam Gaudette. I say partially because Gaudette also played center and did some penalty killing. Those aspects will be replaced by Lars Eller in theory. But the scoring, I believe it was 19 goals from the fourth line and sometimes moving up into the top six, being on the second power play unit, I think Arthur Kaliyev has a great chance to fill in that role of just being able to move up and down the lineup, have that scoring ability lower in the lineup if he can sort of change his game to be able to play with fourth liners consistently enough defensively to stay in the lineup too. Because I think he is on a two-way contract, so if the rest of preseason doesn't trend too well for him, he could be starting on Belleville, but I think they're really giving this guy an opportunity, and he's got the shot to score goals in the NHL. So if they use him well, limit his minutes, I think he could be sort of like Adam Gaudette was last season.
Yes, and even if he doesn't crack the main roster, even if he is, replaced by a different bottom six guy, he goes from being a capable guy you can fill in on the second power play or drive offense in your bottom six to someone who's going to be playing on the top line in the AHL with Stephen Halliday, someone who's known for passing a lot. I think no matter what, this is a really good signing for Kaliyev. Now, if he's a player who wants to stay in the NHL, he's really going to have to make sure that he's a little bit more of a two-way player, I think, especially for Travis Green's style of hockey, but especially also with Travis Green being very aware of how Gaudette filled in last year and how crucial Gaudette was in a way to the Sens playing so well last year. I think there's kind of going to be that precedent to keep Kaliyev in the NHL just to add that offense in a bottom six that outside of Greig and Pinto is pretty lacking.
And we know that Steve Staios likes Arthur Kaliyev. He's had him as a player in junior. I believe they won the OHL championship and Lauer owning the team as well, right, down there. So those guys have a connection that might give Kaliyev a little bit of an inside track to making the roster.
Or a little bit of leeway to not be sent down so soon.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like he could be a little bit of a Swiss Army knife depth player where you can move him around the lineup and he can find the back of the net occasionally. I'd say it was a really good showing for him in his first game in a Sens uniform. I think then the last guy I want to touch on today is I would say the biggest standout for the Sens today being really Greig, playing second line center. He played wing for most of last season. I feel like him playing center today was just sort of like we don't have our other regular centers in the lineup. We don't have Dylan Cousins in, and Lars Eller's injured, so we know you can play center. Let's see how it goes. I don't think they're necessarily going to go for that in the regular season just because unless you're going to move Pinto or Cousins to the wing, which I doubt, and you don't want any of those guys on the fourth line. But really, Greig was the standout today with a goal and an assist. And even though it was the first game in the preseason, he's still being a complete gamer, a complete shit disturber, and pissing off these guys who play for the Toronto Marlies, who maybe not have even played against Ridley Greig before, but in their first time playing against them, they're like, we hate this guy, we're going to go after him. He almost got a knee on knee and a headshot in one hit, which was a little bit crazy, and somehow the Sens end up on the penalty kill after that, but Ridley Greig was kind of the focal point of this game for the Sens in terms of having a positive impact, I'd say.
Yes, where if you were to look at the stats of today's game, which it's a preseason game, there's absolutely no need for you to do that unless someone scores like a hat trick. I feel like Stützle did great eye test, but didn't really do much on the actual stat sheet. I feel like if you were to look at Greig, it's very much what Stützle deserved today, where he has the stats and he very visibly was everywhere. He was forechecking like crazy, skating up and down the ice, playing good defense at the moments they needed to, and playing good offense in the moments they needed to. And obviously being a second line center in this game, he got a lot of power play time as well. So he did well. He was really key to I believe it was the third goal that they scored. He was on the ice and was really key to that play that led to the shot going in. So I just think that out of all the players there, I feel like especially players that we know are going to be on the main roster coming into this year, there are certain players that we want to grow, not only because maybe they're they had a down year, or that we know they have the opportunity to step up. And I think one of those players is Ridley Greig. And I feel like with how he performed today, it's hard not to look at him as like, okay, if you can keep this up, we might see more of you in the top 6 as opposed to in the bottom 6. And I also feel like, with you mentioning Greig playing center because there weren't any other options, totally, yeah. But also, I remember whenever Greig first came into the roster and he was centering a line with Giroux, I think, and that was a pretty fun moment while it lasted as well. So I feel, yes, he primarily played wing, but it's also nice to have Greig as a player who can fill in center when needed. And I think with how he played today, it's hard not to look at it as like, oh, okay, he's not just a winger. He's winger center. He's truly can play either position. And that's going to be really handy for, again, injuries in the roster heading into this season.
For sure, and they can play him on center on the special teams too, on penalty kill,
Yes.
on power play, which is good flexibility to have. It's funny, like you mentioned, how it felt like Stutzle should have had a bunch of points today, and it was Greig who ended up getting 2. I think it was a little bit of the first line was kind of hot dogging it, and really Greig just keeps his game simple every single night and just plays that grinding style that is effective and just getting under the opponent's skin. He does it even in preseason. Like we were kind of referring to earlier, of the veterans really don't put much stock into preseason. They might not even really give a crap, but Ridley Greig played today as he always does and produced. It ended up on the score sheet, which is what you love to see. Like you said, if this keeps up, regardless of whether he's playing left wing or center for the rest of preseason, if this keeps up, I could easily see him moving up to that second line left wing spot during the regular season, because it's currently occupied by David Perron, who was really good in that spot down the stretch last season, but also had a really slow start when he was dealing with some injury and personal issues. Hopefully those are all in the past for him, wishing him the best. He could just stay in the top 6 all year, David Perron, but if he starting to slow down with age too, because he's an older player, I could easily see Ridley Greig getting into that second line left wing spot if he keeps this performance up in preseason.
Oh, and also really quick as well, there are 2 other players I think that deserve a small shout out who also played pretty well today. I think his name is Ollie Lixell. Yes, Ollie Lixell had a pretty solid game. He was one of the goal scorers today. It was off like a bang play in front of the net. It was just a rebound and off of like a Kachuk and Batherson play, and he was the one who ended up finally putting it in the net. I think he had a really solid game today. I didn't notice any worries for him defensively. I think he had a pretty good game offensively, especially scoring. And another player who I didn't even mention to you before we filmed this, but I honestly think deserves a shout out today, Lassi Thomson. Welcome back to the Sens organization, buddy.
Yeah.
He did have a really solid game.
I meant to mention him when we were talking about the D earlier, but I kind of forgot, which is funny because it feels like we all forgot that he was still property of the Sens after he left for Europe. And to be honest, I was a little bit surprised when he signed and we knew that he was going to be returning, because like we were just talking about the Sens right D depth earlier and we didn't even mention him, which is kind of funny to me. We didn't have him
last year, right? So having him back in the organization is just another player who might be able to fill in when need be.
But that's what is a little strange to me, is that I'm kind of surprised that he did decide to come back and sign with the Sens, just because that right D depth is prominent right now. He's probably going to be like the number 2 right-hand D in Belleville. And that's
with Jensen being healthy. It actually might be a situation where if Jensen is not available, that bumps Spence up, that bumps Matsumpalo into the roster, then maybe you'll have another D as a backup. Maybe you have to bring up someone like Sabrango or even Yakemchuk as an extra, just to have something available in case anyone else goes down. Then you might even be the top player in the AHL, get good numbers, get a lot of ice time. And not to mention, let's even add into the fact that Gannett's still unsigned, which, again, he was such a focal point to the AHL roster last year, Maxence Gannett. So I feel like Lassi Thomson, he came back partly because I believe he still had the rights, or the Sens still had the rights to him. So maybe he didn't have a lot of availability in terms of going anywhere else, except for asking for a trade. But I feel like at the same time, with how the Sens are currently in a position, I think it was a great move because he genuinely could get ice time, and not ice time like he did during the bubble where he filled in when everyone was injured and didn't really do much. I feel like this is a much better opportunity for him in case there is some injuries, and even if not, it gives him a more well-rounded AHL team to play on.
Well, that's the funny part to me, is because when he was here before, that should have been the better opportunity, right? When we didn't have that good right D depth. But it was just
Yeah.
the case that he wasn't really ready for the opportunity.
No, yeah,
that
he was
there for
still
him.
too young, I think.
Now, after a season, pro season over in Europe, maybe he's a little bit more developed. But then there's way more guys in front of him. So it's going to be interesting to see if he does end up getting any NHL games this season. Like you said, with injuries, if Jensen's out for a while, or if you get 2 right-hand D injured, or maybe even if they really want to overcook Yakimchuk in Belleville, if he stays in Belleville for most of the season, maybe Lassi Thomson is the call-up option on right D ahead of Yakimchuk, maybe.
Yeah, maybe if Yakimchuk's cooking so much where he is like an AHL All-Star and they want to keep him there, bring him next year into the fold. I'd understand them bringing someone else up like Lassi instead, just because Lassi technically has played a little bit in the AHL already. But I honestly don't think that unless Yakimchuk is carrying it up in the AHL and he still has defensive issues, I don't see how they don't bring him up in the AHL a little bit if he is tearing up the AHL. But even then, I'm glad that they have a lot more right-handed depth of people who could make the NHL. And even if they don't have necessarily good showing, it's good to give someone like Lassi Thomson a try again, especially after his time in Europe. And it's good to give someone like Yakimchuk a try if he does well. It's good to give someone like, even to an extent, Sabrango and Donovan some opportunity in the third pair if you want to see how they're going to do. Maybe not so Donovan, he's still a little bit young, but I'd be completely fine with giving Sabrango some time, especially if Klevin is unfortunately injured for the first couple of days. Again, hopefully not. But yeah, I like I said earlier, I'm so much more comfortable with the defensive depth, and I'm glad to see Lassi Thomson had a good game today too.
I feel like such an idiot because when you were talking, you said like Sabrango and Donovan, and I'm like, he's Donovan Sabrango.
No,
and then, you were talking about Jory and Donovan, but then in my head I was confusing his name and thinking that his last name was Dorian or something. That I had Pierre Dorian on the brain. My brain is fried right now. But yeah, you had it correct, and I was losing it a little bit. But any other last thoughts on today's what we saw today or training camp going forward?
I think that the only thing that I really want to focus on in a very basic sense with this preseason is I'd like to see more Yakimchuk. I'd like to see Zetterlund more, especially on the top line with Stützle. I'd like to see Kaliyev continuously throughout the preseason just to see how he gels with some of the centers and wingers we already have in our lineup. I'd like to see some Meriläinen time. I'm sure he will get some time. And last but not least, honestly, I think they should try out Sanders and Spence at some point. But aside from that, no one gets injured. I'm happy.
Yeah, totally agree. I think the next game being on the road in Toronto, often in preseason, they'll have like a totally different lineup from each game. So maybe a few guys from today's game will go to Toronto, but it's probably going to be like all the guys who weren't playing today playing in that game on the road. And also, usually you get the better lineup with your veterans like at home ice. So we'll see a lot more of those fringe guys in the next game in Toronto, I think, on the road. So we'll see Yakimchuk, we'll see Zetterlund in there. He'll probably be top line if they don't bring over any of the other guys who played today. So that'll be interesting to see for sure. Yeah. Maybe playing with Dylan Cousins, maybe. Yeah. That could be a look that we might see. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for today's episode, our first episode of the 2025-2026 season. We don't have our schedule completely nailed down yet. We might do another preseason episode, but if not, we will definitely do an episode right before the regular season when we get the final roster in place. Yeah. So we'll be back for that. Thank you everyone so much for watching or listening. Go Sens, go.